Good morning, class. Now, today, what we are going to talk of is on the qualitative data analysis. Uh, so that's in our last class, what we had done, and we had been talking about the quantitative data analysis, and we had divided the entire portion into three parts. And so today we start with the qualitative data analysis. Okay, so in the entire chapter, how it's been divided, the entire chapter on qualitative analysis. So we first start with the qualitative data analysis, then difference between qualitative and quantitative analysis, deductive basis and inductive basis, and then analysis of qualitative data. So let's start with the first topic, that is difference between qualitative and quantitative analysis. These are the criteria. The first is the purpose. For qualitative analysis, the basic purpose is to understand and interpret social interactions, whereas for quantitative analysis, it's to test hypotheses, check the cause and effect, develop predictions for the future. Studied group. In qualitative analysis, it's a small group and which is selected intentionally. Quantitative analysis, it's a larger group and selected randomly. The data type that we use in qualitative analysis are words, images, objects, whereas quantitative analysis talks about numbers and statistics. The data form in qualitative analysis, it's open-ended responses, interviews, participant observations, field notes. Whereas for quantitative, it is precise measurements using structures and validated instruments for data collection. With regards to type of data analysis, for qualitative analysis, we talk about the patterns, the features, themes, and identification. Whereas, on the other hand, we talk of statistical relationships and identification in quantitative analysis. The results. For qualitative analysis, we look at particular findings and it's less generalizable. But whereas for quantitative analysis, it is generalizable findings and can be applied to the other populations also. So these are the basic differences. All right. Now, there are specific types of qualitative research. The different types. First is ethnographic, where the purpose is to understand the culture, values, and perceptions. Grounded theory, where the research has been conducted without any preconceived ideas or theories, and it's used to develop some new theories. Narrative, where we understand how people assign meaning to their life stories. It's also used for analyzing transcripts of therapy sessions. Case studies, to understand how and why an individual, group, organization, or community has experienced a particular problem or intervention. And participatory action research, which brings groups of people, that includes your clients, together to conduct research. And the basic purpose is to use research to document social problems and bring forth the social change. The types of qualitative data that we have, it could be of structured text, which is writing, stories, survey, comments, new articles, books. It could be unstructured text, where we talk of transcription, interviews, focus groups, conversation that we have, sometimes audio recordings, that's where new music coming to play. Video recordings are also there, which talks of graphics, art, pictures, visuals. Deductive basis of quantitative analysis. Now, when a theoretical framework is used today, it's talking of when we talk of a theoretical framework, when a theoretical framework is used to design and analyze a research. Okay, so that's where we use the deductive basis, and we also use using of inductive approach to data analysis, which helps to connect the research to the existing body of knowledge. What the research that you're doing, how you connect it with the existing literature or knowledge that is there, how do you conduct, right? And it also provides an initial analytical framework. And inductive approach is used to start and direct the analysis. Okay. Now, how do we start deductive analysis? It must have a theoretical or descriptive framework to identify the main variables and components, themes, issues. There has to be a descriptive framework, which would help in identify the main variables, the issues, themes, and it should be aware. It should be aware of the predicted or presumed relationship between variables. Either you know the existence of the relationships, the existence you can you're aware of the predicted relationship or presumed relationship where you make an assumption. And what are the basic steps which is involved? Firstly, to devise a theoretically based proposition which has to be tested. Then collect data. Second step is to collect data to compare the findings in relation to the theoretically based proposition, right? What you're finding in reality and what you have theoretically proposed, what is comparing it, right? And if wherever needed, amend the theoretically based proposition wherever necessary, right? In based on the findings that we have found out on the data collected, and then collect a second round of data in relation to the amended theoretical proposition. So this process continues until satisfactory explanation is derived. Now, in case of an inductive approach to data analysis, what happens is data are collected and then explored to see which themes or issues to follow up and concentrate on. So it's first the data is collected and then you relate it, right? Which are the areas or issues that needs to be followed up or where you need to concentrate. And so it's generally done in an exploratory study. Now, how do we start inductive analysis? We first collect data and then analyze them to develop a conceptual framework, right? Which would, for guiding us for any subsequent work, okay? It's also known as grounded approach, and it requires clear research purpose. It uses elements of deductive approach as theoretical proposition developed, and then its applicability is tested through subsequent collection of data collection and analysis. Okay, so first you use the various elements of a deductive approach, right, for developing the theoretical position, and then you test its applicability, whether it can be applied in reality through data analysis, collection and analysis. Now, the approaches in analysis that we have, in deductive approach, what happens is we use our research questions to group the data and then look for similarities or differences. And we use it when time and resources are limited. It's also used when qualitative research is of a smaller component of a larger quantitative study. So a smaller, it's major thing. It's a quantitative. You focus on the quantitative study, and the qualitative research forms a small part of it. Whereas on the other hand, when we talk of inductive approach, it's used when the qualitative research is a major design of the inquiry. More on qualitative research, more of qualitative research is there, and we use emergent framework to group the data and then look for relationships. Okay. Now, what are the steps in analyzing qualitative data? There are some generic strategies that are part of almost every approach to data analysis. That's very common. That is, first organize the data, then look into the findings and organize ideas and concepts, and from there build an overarching themes in the data, right? And then start ensuring the reliability and validity in the data analysis and the findings. Then after that, trying to find out the possible and plausible explanations for findings. And then finally, an overview of the final steps. So the next topic that we have is qualitative data analysis. So first thing is to get started, like a question comes up is, have you ever conducted a qualitative study, right? Which involves interviews, focus groups, observations, documents or artifacts, right? Journal notes or reflections. These are something which we have been doing it in our entire course, discussing, and you have been doing it, right? So what to do with all this data? What will you do, right? Just as there are n number of statistical tests to run for quantitative data, there are also many options for qualitative data analysis. Okay, so basically, when we talk of this, entire session is actually, it's planned out to provide a step-by-step guide for beginning qualitative researchers who wants to know how to apply the appropriate strategies for data analysis, interpretation, and reporting. It's like cleaning your closet, okay? Say, for instance, like think of imagine your qualitative analysis process, like when you have to clean your closet. What would you do? The same basic steps apply here. The same process, right? Take everything out of the closet. That's the first thing. Then sort out everything, right? Whether you want to save it or whether you want to throw it out. Then look out at what you have left and then organize it into subgroupings, which is called chunking. Then organize these subgroups into clusters of similar things that belong together. It's called clusters or codes. And then, like as you put your things back, how would you group them to maximize the functionality? That's the question that comes up. How do the groups make it work together? So that's where we talk of interpretation and presentation, right? This is this is the process. So basically, there are four basic processes. What are these? The first is to have the raw data management, that is data cleaning, right? Then comes up is data reduction, that is chunking, coding. Third comes up is data interpretation, which we talk of coding and clustering. And fourth comes up is data representation, where you tell the story, making sense of the data for others, right? So data analysis spiral, see how it goes. First you generate the raw data, then you organize the data, then read through it and make notes of it, and then identify the main themes, attitudes, and behaviors, then start amalgamating the themes, and then start interpreting the data. And that's how it goes about till you get the final data, your required data. Okay, so second way of analysis is where what happens is we start with the, you see this, we are actually starting with data collection, right? Text, images, and then what happens? Like we are here where we are have files, units, we are organizing it, right? We are all having managing the data, right? And at the second level, what happens? The reflection happens, writing notes across questions. You're reading it from where you're getting it, right? Then comes up is where we talk of the third level is describing, classifying, interpretation. So how do you do it? By context, through categorizing, through comparison. The next comes up is representing or visualizing it, where we can use using matrix, trees, propositions, right? So this is where we talk of the procedure, and this is an example in account, right? So this is how we go about with it. So let's go into the all the four steps in details. The step one is raw data management. So what exactly is raw data management, right? So it's a process of preparing and organizing the raw data into meaningful units of analysis. The data that you collect, that has to be organized, right? So it's like a text or audio data which is transformed into transcripts. You hear the audio data or you read the text and you transcribe it, okay? The image data that is there, so that is transformed into videos, photos, charts. And as you review your data, you will find that some of it is not usable or relevant for your study, right? So this is an example of a raw data sample, right? Step two is the data reduction. First one, so where you get a sense of the data, just of the holistical view of the data. Read it. You have to read it several times. That is immersion, and then classify and categorize it repeatedly, allowing for deeper immersion. So it has to go on. And then when you're doing it, you need to write notes in the margin. That's called memoing. And after that, you have to make a preliminary classification schemes that you reading it, when you start categorizing, you can come up with a preliminary classification scheme that comes out, that starts emerging. So based on which you categorize the raw data into groups, which is also called chunking. Then we have winnowing, where you develop an initial sense of the usable data and the general categories that you will create. Once you read through it and make a note, then you have a sense of the usable data, what data to use, the data you're going to use, and what are the different types of categories that you will create, right? So then you set up a preliminary set of codes, and then cluster the raw data into units that share similar meanings or qualities. After which, create an initial code list or master code book. So this is an example of chunks cluster, right? It's a transcript of interview data. Step two, that is data reduction two. That is the next part of step two, where it's the process of reducing the data from chunks into clusters and codes to make meaning of that data. That entire chunk, from there you start categorizing your data into clusters and codes to have make more meaning to that data, right? So chunks of data that are similar begin to lead to initial clusters and coding. So all the data which are similar, right, they lead to initial clusterings and codings. Codings, like where you are, say for instance, refining, developing book codes, labeling codes, creating codes through 2 to 3 cycles. And when we talk of clusters, that's where you are assigning the entire chunks of similarly labeled data into clusters and assigning some preliminary codes. And the next coding process, right? Next thing. So what happens there? So initial coding may include as many as 30 categories that can happen. Then you start reducing the codes once, or maybe probably twice, and reduce it again to refine to codes that are mutually exclusive and also include all raw data that was identified as usable. Okay, right. So a priori or in vivo codes. What is a priori? These are the codes which are derived from literature or theoretical frames. And in vivo, that is inductive or grounded, these are the codes which are derived from the data. How? By using code names drawn from participant codes or interpretation of the data. It's like magic. Okay, it's like magic. That's a phrase that could form the basis of a code category. That's an example. So the coding levels could be descriptive to interpretative to pattern coding. So it happens. That is when we say it moves from summary to meaning. Descriptive is summary, interpretative is meaning, and pattern coding is explanation. Or it could be also open to actual to selective coding. That is, open means that is from the initial theory, and actual is developing relationships between codes, right? For selective coding for the emerging theory that comes up, right? Or it could be from first cycle to second cycle coding, that is from moving to describing the data units, that is the first cycle. The second cycle is inferring the meaning. So there could be different ways of coding, the coding levels, like how you move from different. You have to go for different levels of coding from big, so a huge number of codes, then you start refining and coming down to a less number. So this is a sample of coding that we have, okay, based on the transcript of interview data. Right. So coding levels, as we were just talking about, descriptive to interpretative to pattern coding, that is where we said moving from summary to meaning to explanation, right? So we just said again, open to actual to selective coding, that is moving from initial theory to developing relationship between codes for emerging theory. Or the third type is moving first cycle to second cycle, where we move from describing the data units to inferring the meaning. If you see this, it's all, what does it say? I always wanted to get my doctorate, but I never felt I had the time. Then I reached a point in my career where I saw that without the credentials, I would never advance to the types of position I aspire to. But I doubted I could do the work. I wasn't sure I could go back to school after so much time. And did I have the time with working and a family? These are the things I struggled with as I looked for the right program. Finally, starting the program with others like me, it felt surreal. Once you switch gears from being an established administrator at a college to being a doc student, you realize you lose control over your life. You're not in charge of the classroom like you are in office, but also once you say you are a duck student, people look at you differently. And people at work begin to take you more seriously, ask you questions as if you're like I now possess special knowledge. Because what happens, was going for doctorate. It was the same information I had shared, like it's previously, but somehow it had a special quality. It's like magic. Now the same information that, so what's happening it when you were working in administration, and the information that you share, and now as a doctoral student, when you share the same information, people take it in a different way. Like, why? As if PhD students, it's a different people have a different opinion, so it's like magic. So how do you go for chunking to coding? See the red lines, all those red parts, these are for credentials like codes which would include like career goals, CG, career advancement. CG is career goals, advancement is CA. The blue part that you have is it's for personal struggles. Like the codes can include self doubt, we are doubting, ST. Time management is also coming, TM. The green is for shift in identity, right? From job administrator to dark student. The codes here could include student role, that is SR, identity at work, IW, or shift in control, that is SC. So see this chunking, clusters, coding, so it's going on. This is an example, right? So, coding progression, descriptive to interpretative. Descriptive is credentials, right? So, taking the same example that we've just discussed, where we have CG and CA, that is need for career and advancement of goals, right? And personal is where we're talking of PhD, PG, PWL, that is self doubt, personal growth, work life balance, and identity, where the interpretative is identity shifting, student role, shift in control, right? So this is where we talk of descriptive to interpretative. Next, from on the other hand, that is from pattern to inductive meaning. So the pattern is CR, where needing a doctorate to advance professionally and meet personal goals for achievement. PG, that is personal struggles, which are involved to address self doubt about abilities, trying to achieve things before time runs out, balancing responsibilities with family, self work. So these are the inductive meaning that comes up. IS, right? We're managing to shift from student to graduate, from candidate to doctor, from non expert to expert in work settings, from losing control to regaining control at home and work. So this part is where we talk of the descriptive, you're interpreting it, and that's where we talk of the inductive meaning. So that's how the progression happens. Step three, right, is data interpretation and themes. Chunks of related data that have similar meanings are then coded in several cycles, right? And once coded, what happens? These chunks become clustered in similar theme categories. You are putting it into similar categories, right? And create meaning for those clusters with labels. You're clustering it, similar items in the one cluster, and you give a meaning to it with have a proper label, and there has to be a meaning to it. And from there, like there's a themes emerge from these clusters, right? And so we need to interpret these themes to answer the research questions, right? So see, this is the same sample that we have with the question that came up, right? So the same example that we had. Now what happens here? How do we compile the clusters into emerging themes? See, red ones are where we talk of, this is where red are credentials, blue is personal struggles, green is shift in identity. So that's how you start clustering it. Three different clusters, red, blue, and green. So then you begin to see the themes emerge, right? What are the themes that we have? Getting the degree, becoming a new person, personal achievement, right? So credentials is getting the degree, personal struggle is where you become a new person, and where you shift in identity is personal achievement. So that's how it comes up, right? The fourth step is data representation, where which is actually talking of interpretation or analysis of qualitative data simultaneously. It occurs, interpretation and analysis occur simultaneously, where the researchers actually interpret the data as they read and reread the data, categorize and code the data, and inductively develop a thematic analysis. And the themes then become the story or the narrative, right? So data representation types, it can be like of different types, telling the story with the data, right? So how do you do that? It can be storytelling or narrative, chronological in a sequential manner. It could go in a flashback, critical incidents, theater, thematic, could be visual representation, figures, tables, charts. So this is one way, telling the story with data, right? And these are different ways that you use it, right? How will it look in the end, right? So this call, like, how would you go into it? Like, this is, we are taking it from an expert from jumping into Abba's life after the doctorate, right? So same thing that happened, that the same example that we were giving. So how would it look like at the end? This qualitative phenomenological study sought to explore doctoral degree graduates' perceptions of self, identity, and purpose in the post dissertation phase, seeking participant perspectives of the phenomena translation. Several research has been conducted on currently enrolled doctoral students, overcoming obstacles to completing the dissertation, managing feelings of isolation and disengagement, successfully completing dissertation research and manuscript preparation, negotiating relationship with advisors and committee members, and searching for teaching or scholarship positions after degree completion. So research on the doctoral degree graduate has been conducted on individuals in PhD programs where post-graduation transition has focused on moving into traditional academic roles, right? And where we have minimal research has been conducted on ED, EDD graduates who are already actively engaged as professionals or practitioners in their fields and who have also balanced work-life challenges while pursuing their degrees. The next comes up is the personal achievement, accomplishment, the issues of personal accomplishment, anxiety, isolation, loss, hopes, aspirations, identity and role clarity, and professional recognition were all examined through the lens of the lived experience of purposefully selected participants, all of whom recently graduated from a small EDD program in the Northeast. So, by integrating the two conceptual frameworks of Neurojarton's adult development theory and Lackman James midlife development theory, the following themes emerged. You are not the same person. The degree is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, what do I do with all this time? And when will you crown me king or queen of the world? So these themes reveal the experience of the recent doctoral degree program graduates' perceptions of the transition from doctoral student to graduate. So this is how you should be ending it. This is an example. Okay, so this is based on the analysis. And then comes up the validity test. Validity, there has to be a validity test. So it has to be intensive long-term endearment, like more data, where you use more data, repeated observation and interviews. Then next comes up is rich data, which is full and detailed descriptions. Respondent validation. Ask validation, where you ask them if the reporting was correct, though this could be just as invalid as the original work, right? It could be that, like, it may be like they may not say. So it could be that problem can come up. Intervention, that is, interact with them and see how their behavior changes. Searching for some negative cases. Triangulation, that is, where you collect data from a variety of settings and methods. Quasi statistics, that's, for example, frequency counts. And comparison, that's where we talk of multi-case or multi-site studies. Now, the computer software we use when we are, because we're dealing with so much huge number of data, so we need computer software. And the softwares that we use are Atlas or TI, Hyper Research, NVivo, MaxQDA, NUDIST, right? And these software packages either assist with theory building or with concept mapping. There is data voice recognition software is also there, which converts the audio into text. It's like these softwares, example of these softwares are like Dragon, right? So, and these are the references that we have. Okay, so that's all that we have from here. And if you have any other questions, if you have clarifications, we will be discussing in class. Okay, so till then, have a great weekend.